Hi, welcome to a new video, and in this one I want to talk about Project Cars and Project Cars 2. The main reason being there's been a message from the Slightly Mad Studios team that both of these titles are being delisted for sale in the coming months. So in the case of Project Cars, it's coming off of sale and being delisted on October the 3rd. And Project Cars 2 is being delisted on September the 21st, and this appears to be mainly down to licensing. It's something we expect. There's been quite a few titles over the years that have been delisted. Obviously from a digital storefront point of view, that means you can't buy used copies, which from a game preservation point of view is arguably an issue. The games, however, will still remain fully playable, and you'll still be able to use all features including multiplayer, so you can still play them. But this basically prompted me to put together a video I've actually been wanting to put together for a number of months, and that's around Project Cars to a small degree, but mainly Project Cars 2, and how good it still is as a title. It really is still an absolutely cracking title. So I'm going to focus most of this on Project Cars 2 because to a large degree Project Cars 2 pretty much refined what came in Project Cars 1. Yes, graphically the first one was slightly better, but there are a lot of changes made to the second one that I personally think outweighed the slight loss in graphical fidelity. And I am going to talk about the console and PC versions because there are some quite noticeable differences between the two, but I still think the console version is arguably the more important of the two, and I'll come to the reason why towards the end of the video. That, by the way, is a hint to watch all of it. So kicking off, I just want to get the elephant out of the room first of all, which is Project Cars 2 and the first one are not perfect. They can be a little inconsistent in terms of quality. There can be a few shonky bits around some of the diff behaviour on some cars, but for the most part it's okay, it's good enough. Force feedback, not brilliant with some wheels, and certainly in the first title an absolute pain in the backside to set up. PC users had it a hell of a lot easier because you on PC can download custom force feedback files, and for example the Pop Racer ones that are around at the present moment are absolutely stunning and really do completely reinvent the force feedback on Project Cars 2. And I've done a separate video on that, and I will leave a link to that down below, because if you play Project Cars 2 on PC and you haven't given those a go, honestly do yourself a favour and give them a go. They are absolutely astounding. And then obviously you have the fact that the clutch is to all intents and purposes effectively useless. In Project Cars 2 you could change gear without actually bothering with the clutch, not because the clutch doesn't work technically, but because the synchro is set to such a large degree of slip that effectively if you miss shift or mess up your shift, the synchro compensates for it to such a degree that the clutch may as well not be working. But those aside, I want to talk about what it did well, because this is a kind of, in a little bit of a way, a love letter to Project Cars and Project Cars 2. So first of all, one of the things I want to get out of the way is, despite what I've just mentioned, overall Project Cars 2 does actually a fantastic job with its physics. Overall it's very, very good. There's room for improvement, undoubtedly, and AMS2's carrying the torch for that at the moment, but overall it does a cracking job with its physics. It really does. In particular, how it represents load transfer and how its tyre model works, because its tyre model still is one of the best out there. It's an incredibly detailed and in-depth tyre model that works very, very well across a wide range of different tyre types and carcass types and tyre sizes and tyre temperatures. And I honestly don't think there is another title out there that really is a match across as wide a range for Project Cars 2 in that regard. I really don't. And those kind of things make a huge difference, particularly if you've got a title that's got a fair share of vintage vehicles in it, and Project Cars 2 definitely has that, and it works well. just expanding on that, front-wheel drive cars. I personally think that Project Cars 2, certainly on console for me, was one of the first titles that really got front-wheel drive cars and how they should behave, particularly with regard to lift-off oversteer and how that behaved and how that worked in both road and racing front-wheel drive cars. You know, both Assetto Corsa and Project Cars got this right on console, and you know, there are big name console titles out there that still mess this up, that still haven't actually nailed one of these fundamentals of what is an incredibly popular class of race car, because it is. You know, trying to pretend front wheel drive race cars don't exist really is a bit daft when they're incredibly popular, not just in feeder series, but you know, the British Touring Car Championship and the WTCR, these are huge global championships, or globally watched championships, that, you know, are predominantly front-wheel drive driven, and it does an absolutely cracking job of the vast majority of the physics. Now, you might not want to take my word for it, in which case I'm also going to leave a link down below to a racing driver and instructor by the name of Nick Romano, who basically will fight anybody that doesn't agree that Project Cars 2 is both a sim, and B, does a really good job overall with its physics. And the guy's got the credentials to back it up, and him and a bunch of fellow racing drivers and engineers still to this day are running racing leagues using Project Cars 2. So yeah, it's got to be doing something right there in that regard, and I do strongly recommend going and watching that video if A, you're not easily offended by vulgar language, which I'm definitely not, B, you don't mind somebody talking far too fast for their own good, and C, you're willing to put aside your preconceptions and actually listen to somebody who knows what the hell they're talking about why Project Cars 2 is indeed a sim, because it is. But then beyond that, what I want to get into the real heart of what Project Cars 2 does really well, and arguably would do well even if it wasn't a sim, you know, if it was a lighter offering, so to speak. It's not, but if it was. And that is, first of all, its track list. The track list in Project Cars 2 is, when you consider there's no mods in here, an absolute work of genius. It's got an incredibly good list of tracks that encompasses not just your normal circuits that you expect every title to have. It's got the Nordschleife in there, it's got the Nürburgring GP and all of the associated layouts for it. It's got the likes of Monza, etc. It's got all the big hitters you expect, but then it throws in a load of unexpected ones or lesser known ones. So there's a lot of British circuits that are used heavily in national championships in the UK. So you've got the likes of Donington Park, you've got the likes of Alton Park, which is a personal favourite of mine. But then you throw in some of its street circuits, its fantasy circuits that are in there as well. You throw in what in my opinion is one of the best fantasy tracks around, which is Bannock Brae. I think it's absolutely brilliant. You've then got a load of rallycross tracks in there, both older ones and current ones, and you might think, oh, rallycross, it's a racing, it's a circuit racing focused title, how's that really going to work? Well, I'll tell you, it works absolutely brilliant. The rallycross physics and the way the tyre model and the suspension model and everything adapts to it in Project Cars 2 is ridiculously good. Honestly, they could have taken that part of it, packaged it up and put it out as a dedicated rallycross title, and it would have been worth buying. It absolutely would have been worth buying. And you've then got test tracks. You've got the Porsche test track in there, you've got Fiorano, the Ferrari test track in there, you've got the Mercedes-Benz Ice Arena in there, which is just ridiculously good fun. These three tracks, they're no good for racing. You can't really race on them, particularly the Mercedes-Benz Ice Arena. It's in there as a sandpit to play around with, to have fun, and that is exactly what it enables you to do, and it's all the better for it, which is, you know, really, really great. And it's then got the tracks again that you don't really come across that often. Places like Sugo, places like Brno, Cadwell Park, you know, and then you've got California Highway and the Azul Coast, which are point-to-point runs across roads, effectively, and it all works well. And then you add in the car list to this nonsense, and just sheer lunacy, and you've got, again, you don't have the biggest car list out there. It pales into insignificance in comparison to the car lists in the likes of Gran Turismo or in the likes of Forza, but what it does give you, for the most part, is a really, really well curated car list. Most of the classes have a reasonable amount of content in there that you can get to grips with and work, and if you're fortunate enough to be on PC, you can actually add in modded cars into here as well. You can't mod in tracks, it's just not open to that as a platform and a game engine, but you can add in cars, and on PC that works well. But what you have there as a core, and with the DLC, on the whole, is a really good offering, and they have tried to complete the car classes as much as they possibly can. You know, so big hoo-ha, to a degree rightly, was made about Gran Turismo 7 getting the R30 Skyline Silhouette, the Group 5 car, and indeed it did get that. But it stands alone in its class, so they've kind of shoehorned it into their equivalent of GT3 Group 3, which makes no sense. Well, that car was in Project Cars 2 years ago, and not on its own, with a whole bunch of other Group 5 cars, which these things are great, they're utterly insane, and to have a load of Group 5 cars together like that is brilliant. But even better, they actually drive like a Group 5 car is supposed to. These have older rubber on them, it's got more movement and flexibility, but more important, these cars are smaller engine, stupidly huge turbos, bucket loads of turbo lag, and that's recreated really, really, really well in Project Cars 2. Off boost, you know, you're struggling to generate enough power to be competitive. As that boost hits, it hits like a sledgehammer. The car is moving under you, it's active, it's alive, you've got to control it and fight it. And with Group 5 racing, half of the race was against your own car, the other half of the race was against the competitors. And with possibly the exception of Race Room, Project Cars 2 was really one of the few titles to really properly demonstrate how cars of that type, with that big, low spool turbo, loads of turbo lag effect, you know, should be, and it does it incredibly well. You know, and then add in a decent smattering of road cars, front-wheel drive touring cars, rear-wheel drive touring cars, Group 2, GT3, GT2, some own brand formula stuff, a load of LMP stuff and prototypes. It's just got a great car list that on the whole is really well put together and really works well, and builds you up from feeder series like Formula Rookie, which is their knockoff of Formula Fords, and, you know, the likes of the Renault Sport Clios that behave as they should do. It's just great stuff, really well put together. So you've got this fantastic track listing, one of the best curated track lists I think any title's ever had. You've then got this really strong curated car list. You add it in to make this sandpit, which then, when you combine it with the weather system and the live track system that started life in the original Project Cars and really then came into its own from a Project Cars point of view in Project Cars 2, and again AMS2 has taken this and run with it, where you can put together all sorts of daft combinations. You know, you've got the weather that you can have in there, that you can mix and match weather transitions, a track that actually is alive, that is randomly generated on seed data, how the track's water surface is going to pool, based not just on the random data but also the track surface mesh and the accuracy of it. Yeah, Gran Turismo 7's only just introduced something like this into Gran Turismo this generation and last generation. Project Cars was doing this years ago, and I'll be blunt, doing it better than Gran Turismo is to this day. And it makes a huge difference because you've just got it. It just adds even more variety to the sandpit, and that stuff's available on every single track, not the occasional ones, with 24-hour cycles on every single track. So you've got full dynamic weather and dynamic time of day for every track in the game, which means you can do really daft things. You want to take out your Formula car on studded ice tyres at the Nürburgring Nordschleife on Christmas Day in the snow. Go for it. Want to break in later that night and take your Ford F-150 fun haver around in the dark, in the snow, in a blizzard? Go for it. You can do it, and anything in between. And it runs reasonably well as a platform. It's reasonably steady. It looks fairly decent. It did push some of the older generation consoles to their limit. I'll be perfectly honest with that. It definitely did. And the kind of like halfway house PS4 Pro and the current generations definitely, even without a patch specific to them, are giving it a new lease of life. Yeah, and generally it did work better from that perspective on PC. However, that leads me to really my final point on this, and why I think it was such an important title, particularly for console. And that is, it brought an awful lot of stuff that's taken for granted, and I now take for granted as a PC sim racer, into the console arena. It brought with it, that real depth of customization that I still see people on forums complaining about with other console-specific titles. The ability to almost completely customize the HUD is there. The ability to set your field of view in various camera views, it's all in there. The ability to play around and tweak with your force feedback. Yes, that is a double-edged sword, but it's better than having basically two values that don't do what they say, and as a result force feedback that you're never going to get even remotely close. It gives you that level of flexibility, that depth, and that sandpit approach that for a long time had strictly been the preserve of the PC gamer and the PC sim racer. And Assetto Corsa did that to a degree, but it didn't have the range of tracks, it didn't have the car list, and more importantly, it didn't have the dynamic time of day and also the dynamic weather that Project Cars 2 has, and Project Cars, the original, brought it together. And that for me is why I still think it's a really important title on console, and one that I'm sad to see get delisted. I understand the reasons why it's getting delisted. I'm not trying to call for a petition to stop that happening. It's license related. That's not going to work. But what I would say is, if you don't already have this as a title on PC or console, find it. Most of the time it's on sale. I'm fairly certain leading up to the delisting it's probably going to be on sale somewhere on a few storefronts, and if you don't already have it, pick it up, give it a go, because it is a lot better than a lot of the naysayers talk about. It's a really good, solid sim racing title that stands up to this day, and one that I still play on a regular basis. And it's almost a shame that the delisting has finally put the boot up my arse to actually get round to recording this video, but hopefully you kind of get a better understanding about why I personally think Project Cars, and in particular Project Cars 2, is a really important sim racing title, not just on PC but in particular on console as well. Hopefully you found this useful, or at the very least entertaining. If you have, please do hit the like button, and if you want to see more content like this, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified when new videos get uploaded. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. Take care, and I'll speak to you all soon. Bye.